Oh, I don't
Okay,
think
we're being recorded.
recorded.
All right, we're being recorded. Great.
Great.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Are we all back now? Good. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more now about a really, really important case law, which was referred to as the Neary judgment versus Hillingdon of 2011. And it's really quite an interesting judgment. It's quite a concerning judgment. And when you've got, I would say, give yourself a good hour to go through it. It's actually quite a challenging document to read, and it actually, as a social worker, it's very important to actually reflect back on what didn't go so well. You don't just learn from what's gone right. And I think this is quite a interesting case because it shows about how Stephen wasn't at the centre of all the professionals' thinking. His thoughts, feelings, wishes weren't considered or explored. His family were excluded from a lot of the decisions. There was a lot of judgments made without, I think, reflection and legal literacy. And it really, if you do the best interest deprivation of liberty training, it's a case law on top of Cheshire West and Gazati that they say really started the ball rolling. He was an autistic chap, and he really was deprived of his liberty quite severely. And it took a long time for recompense and restitution to be made. I know Jonathan gave quite an in-depth and fabulous discussion on the Human Rights Act, but it's very, very important when you're doing mental capacity assessments and deprivation of liberty, or when liberty protection safeguards come into effect, that you focus on person-centred practice, on the principles of the Mental Capacity Act, of the best interest checklist, and the diagnostical and functional tests of the Mental Capacity Act. And everything we do, as I said, must be necessary, proportionate to the harm that the human being is going to experience, and least restrictive and necessary. And when you read Stephen Neary, you'll see that everything that was done to the chap wasn't least restrictive. And the most important article to me in the Human Rights Act in relation to mental capacity and deprivation of liberty is Article 5, right to liberty and security. Article 8, right to private and family life. Article 5 is the right to liberty and security under the Human Rights Act. Everybody has the person to free liberty and security. And a deprivation of liberty assessment is curtailing someone's right to liberty and security. And that is why when you are completing a mental capacity assessment and a deprivation of liberty assessment, you have to clearly record why you're doing what you're doing. What is your evidence? And everything you have tried has been necessary. All the other options have been explored. And this is absolutely necessary to protect the person, to keep them alive in the hospital or the care home, okay? Because Article 5 makes it quite clear that any interference with a person's right to liberty and freedom must be justified and necessary. So please keep mindful of, Article 5. Article 8, as human beings, we all have the right to private and family life. And so did Stephen. He was a human being and a chap that wanted to exist with his father. And when you read the case law, an IMCA was not for an independent mental capacity advocate because there were clear differences in wishes and feelings and thoughts in what Stephen wanted, what his father wanted, and what the professionals thought and felt. But unfortunately, process was not considered to be followed. So that's why it's quite pertinent case law. So please, 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 as a fabulous social worker that I know you're going to go on to be, please make sure that everything you do is in consultation with a human being that is on your caseload. Yeah, and also people that are on your caseload are human beings. How would you feel as a person if I just stormed into your office and made a decision and told you that I was going to do something to you at 12 o'clock? And I didn't ask you what you thought. I didn't ask you what you felt. I didn't consult your family. I didn't look at your past and your past feelings, your thoughts, how you might have solved the situation before. But I just decided because I thought I knew best. That would be considered rude and aggressive from a social etiquette and a human being point of view. But as a social worker, we are taught about legislation, about process, and about human beings. So we need to keep the person in the centre. So it is quite an interesting case law. So it is very, very important that you read it to keep up to date in relation to mental capacity. Okay. Right, so the links to legislation, again, I apologise for my tardy IT skills. If you click onto it, the top one, it is the link to the mental health legislation. Then the next link is the excluded decisions pursuant to the Mental Capacity Act. And then the next link is the link for the Mental Capacity Amendment Act of 2019. Okay. Right. Now, sadly, as we all know, the world has, as I say, collapsed on itself. And we are now have different ways of working going forward. And I think most of us thought that it was going to be a temporary change in our practice and our ways of working. But unfortunately, we're still in the crux of the pandemic, and we've all had to adjust our working practices and our ways of being. Now, it's very, very important to make yourself familiar with the Coronavirus Act. Now, there are many people that believe that the Coronavirus Act has changed a lot of practice, policy, and legislation, but I need to make it absolutely clear that the Mental Capacity Act and the Code of Practice is completely unchanged in relation to the Coronavirus Act. There are a lot of changes in relation to the CARE Act on how you assess and deliver services, which I will be talking about in my lectures in 2021. But the Mental Capacity Act, the best interest principles, the 5 principles of the Mental Capacity Act, the DOLS, eligibility and legal framework and criteria has remained completely unchanged. So please, please, please be aware of that, because some people have been telling me it has changed, but it has not. So please be mindful of that. How we assess people has changed. How we get into care homes has changed. How and if we can get into hospitals has changed. How we get information has changed because of the public health guidance in relation to health and safety, in relation to virus transmission. Like, for example, this time last year, when I had the gift of working with London Met, I had the pleasure of going to the office. I had the pleasure and the gift of hanging out with Catherine and with hanging out with Jonathan. But sadly, because of the Coronavirus Act, we have to do it over technology. Okay, so the differences and how we assess using technology is what's actually changed in relation to mental capacity assessments and deprivation of liberty assessments. Does that make sense? Okay, so I've got guidance down the bottom because if you get onto www.gov.uk coronavirus, usually almost every week there's some new guidance in relation to the Coronavirus Act. So if this link here is for the guidance. When I started to write the lecture, it was November. So that was the first guidance that came out in relation to mental capacity and safeguarding during COVID-19. So that's the first guidance that came out on the 11th of November. Then as I was writing, oh, something seems to have dropped off. Sorry, just hold on. Oh, it seems to have dropped off. Okay. So if you go onto the government website, it will give you information on the latest guidance in relation to Mental Capacity Act. But I can assure you, the eligibility criteria and the processes have not changed. Okay. Right. Next slide. Thank you. Now, I'm going to just really talk briefly about, there seems to be, well, there is. Thank you, Kit. You're a superstar. Really appreciate that. That's great. As I said, mental capacity, if you read the Mental Capacity Act and the Mental Capacity Code of Practice, states that mental capacity is decision specific, date specific, and time specific. And a person lacks capacity to make a decision on balance of probability. And the functional test is either understand, retain, weigh up, or communicate. Now, when you're looking at the Mental Capacity Act, it says, can the person retain or understand it for a material time? Now, at the moment, there seems to be a new construct called executive capacity. Now, executive capacity is not referred to in the Mental Capacity Act or the Mental Capacity Act of 2005 or 2019, and it is not referred to in the Mental Capacity Code of Practice 2005. But some people say, well, does the person have decisional capacity or executive capacity? It is a new construct. So I'm still trying to get my head around how people are actually using it and applying it. So I've just attached some useful community care articles that were printed this year down the bottom to sort of drop the sort of pebble in the pond to get you to think about what mental capacity, executive capacity means. What I've read so far is that it's a construct that people are referring to people that self-neglect or people that have a lifestyle of drugs and alcohol. For example, in relation to hoarding or other forms of self-neglect. For example, if you read the articles down the bottom, what it suggests is that the person can talk the talk but not walk the walk. And that seems to be what a lot of people are saying. Like, for example, people will say on an intellectual level, someone might understand that smoking, drinking, or eating 4 Mars bars a day is going to have consequences to your health, but the decision is still made to engage in that behavior. So some people will say that they can rationalize it or understand it, retain, weigh up the consequences on an intellectual level, but on an executive capacity level, the person is still drinking, still smoking, and like myself, eating too many Mars bars a day. So I think it's an interesting construct, but I think it needs a lot more development and understanding. So I'm not raising it to cause you confusion, but it's something to be mindful about. But I will say it's not in the Code of Practice and it's not a requirement when completing mental capacity assessments, but it is the new flavour of the month in relation to practice out here in the big wide world. We're going to have plenty of times for questions later on, so maybe we could talk about that later. Okay, now I talked about deprivation of liberty safeguards in relation to people that reside in a care home or hospital and haven't been able to consent to that. Now, the deprivation of liberty standards have been around for quite some time, but they are going to change. It's going to change from deprivation of liberty to liberty protection safeguards. And it was supposed to happen in October of this year, but it hasn't met that schedule, and it is actually going to occur in April 22. So that's actually quite a delay, and there is actually a big shift in what is going to change from the deprivation of liberty to the liberty protection safeguards, and it is a radical shift, and there seems to be a lot of debate still as to what the changes are going to be. So I've got down here what the latest fact sheets are. So again, if you go on to www.gov.uk, you've got the fact sheets from the 27th of November and the 30th of November. What's actually going to change is that the whole assessment process is going to change, and who is actually going to be completing the assessments is going to be changing. And the reason why there is a delay for going from the deprivation of liberty safeguards to the liberty protection safeguards is because the code of practice has still not been written and gone through Parliament. So that is the delay. So at present, we are still adhering to the deprivation of liberty safeguards, but it is something that we will need to understand, the liberty protection safeguards going forward. So at present, we're still using the Cheshire West guidance, and we're still using the Gazardi thresholds. Okay. I think I finished what I needed to do, Catherine and Jonathan.
Great.
So I thought if we could get to, I know I've attached a lot of guidance, which I think is really the point of a lecture as well, rather than just sort of reading things out, because I wanted to show is, you know, everything that I've attached is out there in the big wide world.
Yeah.
And as a social worker, you know, to me, ever since day one when I started practicing, I sort of, forgive my Australian terms, I kept a little Rolodex of everyone I've ever met or everyone that I thought would be helpful and useful for me to.
Meg, you've frozen. Oh dear. Okay, hold on. Sorry, guys. Let's just check she's still with us.
She's reconnecting.
Okay.
And it was
so she's just, what a day. Right. Oh gosh. Okay, hopefully she'll be coming back in. I did upload the case study, people, in WebLearn, says the case study, and I've actually got a PDF here. Meg, you back with us in the room?
Yep, I'm still here. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Like I said, I've pinned everything that you sent me, including the books. I posted those this morning. What I suggest that they should do is to start thinking about practice. And I did upload your slides last Monday, certainly when you sent them out. So I'm hoping that people have had the opportunity to look at them. But I think that it'd be quite useful to go through the case study and then give them the opportunity to see whether or not they're able to apply what you've put up today, and then to come back and facilitate that. So I'm hoping that everyone's got the case study. I've got the case study up here. Let me just quickly share files before my internet goes down. and this is the adult case study that I posted. So people can see that. So basically, Meg, can you see that?
I'll read what mine said. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm sure it's the same. Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
Okay. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, are we, no, go on.
Sorry. Yeah, go on, Jonathan. Sorry.
It's sort of interrupt. I was just going to ask, are we going into small groups or are we going to
Yeah.
do this? Wiki?
No. I'll do them in small groups. I'll put them into breakout groups. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the case study is Mohammed is 80 years old and has lived in East London since 1968. He was born in Somalia. Mohammed speaks French, Arabic, Somali, and English. Mohammed has never married and he's lived alone and independently since 1968. Mohammed has never been known to social services or mental health services. Mohammed has had a fall and he was admitted to hospital last month as he broke his arm. He broke his left arm, but Mohammed is right-handed. He was discharged after 10 days and he declined a referral from the ward for an assessment. Oh my goodness, that should say that the hospital social work team. Thank you. The hospital social work team did not assess him as he refused. Mohammed's GP has now made a referral to your community team as Mohammed has now gone home. The GP has requested a Care Act assessment as Mohammed has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's since 2015. The GP is reporting that due to his broken left arm, he is unable to maintain his nutrition and environment. The GP also reports that Mohammed is becoming more forgetful. The GP has stated that Mohammed is a very proud person and has not consulted him.
We lost Meg again. Hold on.
Yeah,
Okay.
Lost Meg. I'll carry on reading while Meg.
Okay.
The GP reports that Mohammed is becoming more forgetful and that Mohammed is a very proud person, and the GP has not consulted Mohammed regarding this referral.
Okay, so the questions are there, people. You are the local authority social worker and have received the referral. How are you going to screen the referral? What are you going to do? What are the principles of the MCA, Mental Capacity Act? How would you test Mohammed's capacity to make a decision? And what needs to be considered when making a best interest decision? So that's on WebLearn. I'm going to put you into groups. I think that we're going to give you 25 minutes, Jonathan? 20 minutes, 25 minutes?
20 minutes, I think.
20 minutes, okay. Meg's trying to come back in. I'm going to get ready to put you into breakout groups. There are 24 people, I think, in the room. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Yeah, 23 if Meg has joined, if Meg's just joined again.
No, from the participants. If you just look at the participants.
Oh yeah, 23, that's right. Yeah, there are 23
okay.
people, yeah. Participants.
Okay, so if I do 6 groups, will that be?
Yeah, well, that would be 4 and 1 group of 3. That's okay. That's good.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to put you into 6 groups. I'm going to start the going into your groups now. Sorry, let me give you the allow attendees to switch groups. Okay, and hopefully we'll get Meg in a minute. All right, people. So we've got 20 minutes, and I will then we'll come into the room.